Welcome to the first episode of the Superpower Radio Show. I am here with,
Mia Dawson.
and I'm Brenda Major. We're going to be your co host on this journey. So, we're excited to provide a safe and supportive community for people impacted by autism. Well, we do want you to know we have a disclaimer. We are not trained clinicians nor diagnosticians. We have no degrees in autism nor the autism spectrum, but the information you'll hear on this show is designed to offer strategies, comfort, support, faith, and humor for caregivers to help them manage the symptoms influenced by this disorder. So today we thought we'd start out by talking to you about what this Superpower Radio Show is, why we titled it the Superpower Radio Show. You want to share that with Amia?
Yes, we believe for autism, Brenda and I both believe that it's not a disorder, although that's what they've called it, or disability. We like to think that God has given a superpower. And so we believe that God has blessed all of us with a unique superpower. And autism just happens to be some of the people out in the world superpower. And so that's why we came up with that. So it's something real creative, something that doesn't feel so clinical.
Mhm.
And so we that's where we came up with superpower. It seems empowering almost.
Yeah, it really does. And we know from your little guy Neo, he definitely has some superpowers, which we'll be talking about. And
Yes.
we also thought about even the caregivers.
Yes.
this
Yes.
this challenge really does, I think, reveal the superpower in the caregivers as well. Would you agree with
Totally agree. Totally agree with that.
that?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So let's get into a little bit. Let's talk about exactly what autism is. And we know that it is a bioneurological disability. It generally appears in kids before they are 3 years old. It
Hmm.
impacts
Hmm.
their normal development of the brain in the areas of social interaction, communication skills, and cognitive function. We do know that there are some kids who have difficulty being verbal and even with their nonverbal communication
Yeah.
and with social interaction. But Mia, when did you first suspect that Neo might have autism?
It was around 18 months. It we had did our regular doctor visit, and we got back home, and I would say it was probably a week or so afterwards he just started to decline in his speech,
Hmm.
got kind of withdrawn, um and I kind of chalked it up as I'm a first time mom, and so I thought maybe this is what babies do.
Yeah.
But it was kind of just strange that he had words before and
Hmm.
then they just sort of left. Um, but again, I would have never thought it was what it was. I just assumed, oh, first time mom, I don't really know. I'm going through jitter. It just wasn't I never would have thought that.
Some of the statistics say that, well, 40% of children with autism just don't speak at all.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and then 25 to 30%, just what you said, they had some words
Yep.
between,
Yep.
12 months and 18 months, and then they
Yeah.
lost them.
Yep.
So how did you feel? What were your first thoughts when you were starting to realize that's, it wasn't just that you were a first time mom and that maybe this is what kids do? When did you notice that, okay, this isn't right? And how did you feel?
His speech, but then he started to, it's what I call it's some of the symptoms that happens. He was
Mhm.
flapping his hands all of a sudden, and he
Mm.
was running back and forth, but he was running like almost like sideways. So we were being in the living room and it was like sideways and he was flapping his, and I was like, why is he flapping his hands like a bird? And
Mhm.
again, it still was kind of like, oh, do boys do this? Like I was just like, do boys do this?
Yeah.
But then it just kind of got kept going, and it was more repetitive. Then he started putting his hands over his ears.
Mhm,
Again, I'm still not knowing that these are signs and symptoms of autism. I have no clue. But
mhm.
as I know, what really triggered me was the flapping of the hands and the running back and forth, and that's where I was kind of like, oh, I think I need to call a doctor because this can't
Okay.
be normal.
Yeah, they tend to call that stimming, where
Yes.
they're trying, almost in some cases, trying to calm themselves
And that's
down.
exactly what he was doing. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
but that had to be disturbing. What were some of the thoughts that were going on in your head?
Um, yes, I was embarrassed because he would
Hmm.
do it out in public.
Hmm.
And so there are people looking at me, and I'm like, well, I don't know what's wrong with him either. I want him to stop
Hmm.
too. Like I didn't say
Yeah.
that, but that's what I'm thinking. Like, okay, I know he doing it too. And because he would be getting overly stimulated. So then he's
Mhm.
like flapping in the cart, or he really didn't make any sounds. If he heard something, if there was a cry or loud, he's got his hands over his ears. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what's going on? So I became very embarrassed. Also kind of like I couldn't control my kid. Like,
Okay.
but
Well,
a little
that's something that I was going to ask you because, before, my experience with Neo,
bit. Hmm.
I wasn't, don't have the intense, constant experience that you do. I'm
Hmm.
trying to think of how I perceived kids when I saw them do that.
Oh,
You
okay.
know what I
Okay.
mean? And
Okay.
and I think
Okay.
I don't think I really thought much about it. I really didn't. I might have looked and said, "Oh, okay." Um, I mean, I don't know that kid. But then when I saw, somebody who is near and dear to me doing it, it kind
Yes.
of took on a whole different.
Yes.
I guess I had more compassion then.
Yes. Yes. And I had been around kids before. So I'm like, I didn't see these kids do that. Is this what happened? What's going on? Like, and then I heard, you heard people, I have friends, they were like, well, boys do different things. I'm like, I don't
Mm,
know if he should be doing this though. So I had all these mixed views and thoughts going in my head. I just knew I was uncomfortable. I said, something is wrong. He should not
mhm,
be flapping his hands as much as he was, and just
mhm.
his and putting his hands over his ears for like the train. I mean everything. And yeah.
So now,
His another thing I forgot to tell
mhm,
you too, Brenda, that I didn't think about was his eating changed.
ah,
So that was a huge thing because he was eating everything: chicken, green beans, corn. Oh, he loved oatmeal. And all of a sudden, boom, it was like, nope, I'm only want to eat this. And at that time, I can't even remember. I think it went from like maybe just bread and then everything I gave him, no, he didn't want it. So his palate also changed, and he had
mm.
a very large variety of what he wanted to eat, and that stopped too.
So now you and your husband Stefan,
Hmm.
um, fortunately, there's two heads looking at this, trying to figure out
Yes.
what to do. Um,
Yes.
can you share some of, what your early conversations were like regarding this?
I don't remember him being too alarmed because he again said, "Babe, this may be just what boys do. I did all kind of weird stuff." I'm like, "Okay, well,
Mhm,
wait a minute." He's like, "You got to understand, you was a girl and I was a boy," and so I kind of was blowing it off because he wasn't as concerned. I
mhm.
think the concern came for him when he still wasn't speaking.
Okay.
And that was more of alarm. The other activities that was going on, he was not as he's like, he wasn't alarmed. He thought it was a boy thing. But the speaking was like, because now you're getting into like 2 and 3.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
so he's still not doing. And so that's where he was more of alarm of like, oh no, we got to go back into the doctor.
Okay. So let me
And
ask you this, since you mentioned the doctor, because
hmm.
and we'll talk about this more on another show. Parents
Hmm.
who are going through all kinds of mental embarrassment and so forth, and they don't want to acknowledge it. But when you
Yes.
guys did,
Hmm.
what was it like? Going and talking to a doctor. Did they know exactly what it was, and what did they say?
No, the first doctor, he said, "Well, can I be honest with you? I have 3 kids and my middle kid never talked to till she was 5." It's like,
Mm.
"Okay." So they were kind of dismissive too. I'm like, "Well,
Mm.
dude, like something's wrong." So the second doctor we went to, he actually did it was an autism screening.
Mm.
And I remember us going through all these questions, and then I had to go back, and it was just so many questions, Brenda. And so then he was able to say, okay, from this screening, there is some signs that he has autism. And then they went and did more testing.
Okay.
Um, but even the second doctor was like, I don't think it's anything to worry about. He's possibly he can grow out of it. They were really, I didn't have that. I had this calming. They were both calming, both
Mhm.
male doctors. They were real calming effect. Like, oh yeah, we see something, but it shouldn't be a big deal. It should, but, and I was totally opposite. I was like, but he's not talking, and
Right.
you're not giving me anything to help me. Um, because I want to say I felt dismissive though, so I'm going to say that I felt
Mhm.
like they were being dismissive. They
Mm.
probably, I don't think they were, but that's what I felt like.
Okay.
Yeah, those were my experience with the
Because
doctors.
I, 'cause I know typically we expect something's wrong. We go to
Yes,
the doctor. They tell us
yes,
what it is. They tell us how
yes,
to fix it. We do
yes.
that. It's fixed. Yay. Um,
They didn't do that. They didn't do that. They didn't do that.
so
My other kid didn't talk.
so
You
how
could
did
just
you come up
wait.
with how did you
I had to really press, like,
Mhm.
hey, he's not talking. Like, I need some help. And then they finally, the second doctor just kind of like, he's like, okay, since you need this and you want, I mean, he said that, since you need this and want this, I'm going to set him up with speech class. He really felt like I needed to wait it out and he was going to eventually talk. I
Wow.
mean, they really both felt that way, but I think I pressed so much that
Mhm.
they end up doing, the first thing they did was we did occupational therapy also, and
Mhm.
speech class for him. That was the first thing we did.
Okay. So it's interesting that, again, another statistic is that this is really more pronounced in boys than
Mhm.
girls. First of all, I don't know if our listeners realize this, but 1 in 44 kids has some symptoms of autism.
Wow.
And boys are 4 times more likely to have autism than girls.
I believe that. I
So,
believe that. And that statistic, Brenda, that
mhm.
has that grown? Because that seems, has it
When
grown?
we
Is it
first started, right, when we first started doing our research into this, it was 1 in 59 kids. And that
wow.
hasn't been that
Wow.
long ago. Now it's one
Wow.
in
And 44.
44. And
Wow.
we know that autism is part of a spectrum that includes Asperger's and attention
Correct.
deficit disorder and some other challenges that
Correct.
kids and adults have. But that is still, you know, staggering.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that when we talk about the symptoms,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
you've mentioned, like the stimming, the flapping, the covering the ears, the nonverbal.
Yeah.
Um, Tell me about, because one of the things that I look at, and some of my friends tell me, "Oh, you just think everybody's autistic," and I don't. but but one thing that I noticed is that a lot of people with autism have this far off look in their eyes, and that's what I thought was so profound with Neo, because I remember playing with him as a little bitty baby and how engaged he was, and then he he got that kind of glazed over look.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
How did that affect you when you started noticing that?
Not being able to, he wouldn't look me in the eye.
Mhm.
And then noticing I am sort of a forceful mom, or kind of like, okay, you need to get it, let's get it done. I have
Mhm.
that type of personality. I had to learn that that was also scaring him, and kind of, and like, you're okay, now you're getting too close. It's almost like I was invading his space, as opposed to he was being disrespectful.
Yeah.
And so I, now I'm really, it's just adding on. When I just had so many emotions. Now you're flapping. Now you're not looking at me. Now your eye. I just was so, it was just so much, Brenda. I was like, oh my gosh. It just sent me. Oh, it was like one thing after another. Because I'm pretty sure the eye staring was already there. I just didn't notice it. So it was like,
Mhm.
oh gosh, here's something else. What's that? What else? And
Yeah.
again, everybody, including my husband, is a wonderful man, but including him,
Yeah.
babe, he's gonna probably grow out of it. Y'all are not
Mhm.
understanding. This kid is like switched. So
Wow.
yeah, trying to, and then him not being able to express. So I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
know
So
what
tell
the
me about
emotion.
that. How difficult? Because it's already, I mean, you're already guessing when your baby is a baby, and that's why they
Yes.
teach babies sign
Yes.
language so that
Yes.
you can kind of better communicate with the baby before they naturally have those verbal skills. But what
That
is it
is so
like
true.
with a kid who develops them so late and they're very limited? How did you deal with that?
I had to be very Holy Spirit led to
Mm-hmm.
have an intuition into my son to kind of pick up on clues of what he was, when, if he was sick, because he wouldn't tell me he was sick.
Hmm.
Um, if he was feeling, I had to be that close in tune with him to pick up other clues for me to understand if he was hungry. Hungry end up happening, well, he would just lead me to the kitchen or
Mm.
lead me to the refrigerator. Um, we did teach a little bit of sign language because maybe that he didn't really take to that very well, but we did teach a little
Okay.
bit of it. Him being sick, I had to kind of pick up on clues when he was kind of like laying around. I remember the very first time, this is probably gross, but I remember the very first time that he vomited,
Yeah.
he didn't know what was going on. And he couldn't tell me that his stomach was hurting.
Ah.
So it happens, it's all over me. Because
No.
he
Now,
really
about how
literally,
old was he then?
he was the very first time was 5. I remember this,
Wow.
5 in our living room. He runs over to me and it just goes everywhere. And
Oh,
it's all over
wow.
and it's everywhere.
Mhm.
And he did not, he couldn't tell me. And so what I learned though, the next time it happened, he actually had clues. I could tell in his body language. And then
Mm.
I was able to like, hey buddy, go get to the bathroom.
Okay.
And then it, that's what I had to learn because he couldn't verbally tell me he was feeling, but I had to learn his body clues
Okay.
of kind of when he was feeling. So those type of things I had to be very well connected to pick up because he could not verbally tell me
Wow.
what was going on at all.
Wow. It just kind of, when you were talking, it reminded me of how when you have a baby, um, any baby, you can look at their face and see when they're doing it in their diaper.
Yes, yes,
And I guess
yes,
you had to have not only that kind of intuition, but even more.
yes. But even more. Yes, you did. I had to have even more of just trying to pick up on him and then knowing and then trying to relay that to my husband because at that time I'm a stay-at-home mom. So he's
Mhm.
not here. And so he's coming home and he's trying to bond. And then I'm like, babe, you got to pick up because he'll then on the weekend he'll like, okay, you can go get a break. I'll stay with them. But then he's learned, hey, what's this? What did this happen? So him even having to, we had to learn how to pick up clues from him because he was not verbally telling us anything.
Wow. So we know that there is still no cure
Correct.
for autism, but they do say that if you detect it early, there are some therapies and strategies you can use. And we'll be talking about those on some shows as we continue on. But
Hmm.
um, can you tell me about any ways that you have seen him progress? Like any progression, like with the, because I mean, one of the things that I think is so cool about your kid is that even though he's not going to give you, his full on contact for very long,
Hmm.
but like when he sees you walking down the hall and he calls me Miss Bunny, he goes, Bunny. So
Yeah.
there is that contact. So tell us a little bit about how you've seen some progress in him.
He is, of course, very much verbal now.
Hmm.
Um, and for him to be a kid on the spectrum, which is where they're opposite, he's a lot more engaging and comforting and wanting to hug and
Hmm.
people that he know. And they usually don't do that at all. They don't
Right.
want you to touch them. They don't want you. And
Yeah.
he's very much more engaging and wanting you to hug, and he'll hold your hand, and he'll sit next to you, and he'll sit on your lap, and because he's a big kid now, he still tries to sit on me and dad's lap. I'm like, boy, you
Mhm.
13, you're a big
Yeah.
boy. But
Like,
he's very much more engaging. He also will tell you, okay, he's able to tell, hey, he had some allergies a couple weeks ago, and mom, my throat hurts, and then he went and got his own supplement to put it, to use
okay.
it. He went and got his own supplement. Okay, mom, it feels better now. So and that's such a big thing for me because he wasn't able to do that when he was younger.
Sure.
So he's able to definitely verbalize what he's feeling, how he's feeling. Now, the other part of that is he sometimes can't get it out all the way where you can understand it. So sometimes it's kind of broken.
Mhm. Mhm.
So he'll say stuff like, "My throat is gone," and his little brother will say, "You mean your throat's hurting?"
You have to interpret.
So he said, "My throat, mom, my throat." He said, "Then he'll come back. Mom, it's back. It's back. It's back. It's back." And he said, "You mean it feels better?" So trying to um it's kind of broken. Especially when he's excited and he's
Mhm.
very excited and trying to get it out. You're like, okay, slow down, buddy, and get it out. But he's made extremely good progress on just his verbal and being able to communicate.
Sure. Now you've already given us some examples of this, and I know that you like to say this a lot, and it's really true.
Hmm.
Everybody with autism, everybody's autism is different.
Yes, 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 yes,
Yeah.
yes.
That.
Each kid that you meet, you can't say I know two people with autism because you don't. You know one. And then you
Mhm.
know the next one because you don't know what it looks like. They just
Yeah.
do not represent in the same manner. Now, they on that spectrum, you may have 5 kids that put their hands over their ears,
Mhm.
but you may have another kid that's very aggressive. I've met moms where the kids were busting out of the house, like trying to get that was part of it. Like they have
Mhm.
the aggression. There's so many different on the spectrum, there's so many different things that go along with that. So um when you meet one kid, you can't really compare them to the other
Yeah. And
when
I
they're on the
get that.
spectrum. You can't really do that.
Yeah, and you mentioned because we've both seen kids on the spectrum who, like you said, are very standoffish
Yes,
and don't
yes,
like any physical touch.
yes,
And
yes,
and again, the cool thing about Neo, he he doesn't have the ability to know like when he's giving you that bone crushing hug that is
yes. That
crushing
is
your
so
bone.
true. That is so true. He does not recognize his strength at all. He gave me a high five the other night, and I said, "Buddy," he says, "Oh, mom, did I hurt your hand?" "Yes, you did, honey. Yes, you did. It's red. Yeah, you did." "I'm so sorry, mom. I'm so sorry." So he does not know his ability of his strength. He does not. He does not. He does not. But that's the part of him where he wants to be like everybody else. He wants to hug, and he's starting to understand that now. He wants to engage in that with everybody else. Only for a little bit. Because
Mhm,
then at a certain point, he's like, "Hey, bye."
mhm. So believe it or not, we have about 5 minutes left.
Oh wow. Oh wow. Wow, wow, wow.
I know, but I wanted to because we're gonna again. I'm so glad we're gonna do this show on a regular basis because I'm
Yes.
taking notes on what's it like to have a teenager with autism, and that's gonna take
Yes.
a whole show.
Yes. 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 Yes.
But tell me about how when he was because he was an only child for how long?
Ooh, 5.5 years.
Wow. Okay, so
Yeah.
now what was the dynamic change when Isaiah popped out?
Isaiah, at first he didn't want Isaiah there.
Mm. Well, and
I
that's
remember
typical, I think.
I remember when we came home, he was like, "So is he staying?" Like at that point he has a little bit of language. He was like, "Are you gonna take him back?" "No, God, you gotta stay here." "Oh, no." But then Isaiah became the person that he started talking to where his language started to come out even more.
Hmm.
So Isaiah has been a true big blessing because I could hear them in their room at night talking, and Isaiah's bringing more language out of him.
Oh,
So
wow.
Isaiah has been he Neo's very protective over him.
Mhm.
He is very much, but he tells him stuff. I've heard him tell him stuff that he necessarily wouldn't even tell me and Stefan.
Wow.
So Isaiah's able to bring that language out even more. Because I think Neo has a language now. It's just like I'll talk when I want to talk. You're not going to force it out of me. So
Mhm.
it isn't even about that he doesn't have it. But that's been a great blessing with Isaiah, that Isaiah is able to bring that language out. Isaiah came and told me, Mom, Neo feels this way. And I was like,
Mm,
well, how do you know that? He's like, well, he told me.
okay.
So yes,
So
yes,
so I would think that that having a super kid in the family, it brings out even more compassion from
yes,
the siblings.
yes.
It's so funny as I've seen, I've had the pleasure of watching them grow up,
Mhm,
and I remember a time when I think maybe Isaiah might have been maybe 2 or 3, and
mhm.
and he's was 2 years old, but really a little 40-year-old
He
man in
sure
there.
was. He
But
sure was.
I
The Lord
remember
restored double time.
I remember
Yes,
how Neo just was so protective. He just wanted
yes.
to hold him and to touch him. And I remember one time, and Isaiah whipped around. He said, "Stop touching me all the time."
Yes, 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 yes,
He
yes, yes.
just loves you. He said, "Well, love me over there."
Yeah. Yes, yes, yes. That is very true. That is
But
very
so it's
true.
kind of neat now that you're saying, that they're each other's really good friends. So how
They
the
are.
relationship has evolved.
They are. They
So
are.
that's
Yes,
really
yes, yes,
cool.
yes.
So we really are about the at the end, and we're about to wrap up our first show. So we hope listeners that you just got a little sample of
Yes,
how we roll and how
yes,
we're going to
yes,
be
yes, yes,
talking. And when we have more information, we're going to be inviting you to submit questions and to send us topics, and
yes,
we will we will research them and we will bring you our perspectives on those. So
yes. Oh, yes.
yeah, and so actually, in our next show, we know that Halloween is coming up, and we're going to talk about, can you take your super kid trick or treating, and we'll
Mhm.
have some tips and some advice for that. So be sure to tune in next time. But in the meantime, we want you to visit our website, which is www.adventuresofneo.com, and you'll find our books. You'll find a lot of other resources that we think will be helpful to you. Mia, you want to close us out?
I sure do. You've been listening to the Superpower Radio Show with your host, Mia Dawson. That's me. And
And Brenda Major.
thank you for listening. And we can't wait to talk to you guys next time. Catch you later.
All right.